On April 2, 2025, the United States government stunned manufacturers, consumers, and policymakers alike by imposing sweeping new import tariffs of 10 to 49% on thousands of product categories, from electronics and machinery to textiles and raw materials, promising that these measures would bring jobs home, rebuild our industrial base, and make America work again. Yet beneath the patriotic slogans and headlines proclaiming a tariff tsunami and a new industrial dawn, there lurks a far more complicated truth. A sudden, broad-brush tax increase cannot, by itself, reverse decades of offshoring, repair fractured supply chains, or heal the social and structural wounds that hollowed out entire communities. To see why, imagine a small precision machining firm in Ohio placing a $50,000 order for specialized components from a long-standing supplier in Taiwan. The parts sail across the Pacific, move through ports and rail yards, and finally arrive 6 months later, only to be greeted by a $10,000 tariff bill. Because many supply chains operate on typical 180-day lead times, that sudden 20% hit shatters cash flow projections, derails carefully planned production runs, and undermines the credibility painstakingly built with overseas partners. Meanwhile, giant conglomerates with deep pockets either eat the cost or quietly pass it on to consumers, placing small and medium-sized businesses at an immediate disadvantage. In effect, blanket tariffs become a blunt instrument that punishes the very companies most in need of stability. Even if every business loudly proclaimed an immediate commitment to reshore its operations, no new factory would materialize overnight. Before a single shovel can break ground, an intricate web of regulatory approvals must be navigated: environmental impact assessments, water use permits, air quality reviews, zoning clearances, building inspections, and more, each stage stretching anywhere from 6 to 18 months or longer in states hampered by red tape or understaffed agencies. Once approvals finally arrive, the real work begins: the pouring of foundations, the erection of steel frameworks, the installation of HVAC and electrical systems, and the wiring of advanced automation networks. Equipment vendors ship multi-million-dollar presses, robotic assembly arms, and high-precision measurement instruments that must be meticulously assembled and calibrated on site. Construction and commissioning alone can easily add another 12 to 24 months. Then comes recruitment, which demands forging partnerships with community colleges to create apprenticeship pipelines, running weeks-long safety and process training programs, certifying workers, and establishing quality control protocols. Taken together, the entire process, from the first permit application to ramping up a facility to 70% capacity, can span 3 to 4 years, by which time global competitors may have already advanced to the next generation of robotics, materials, and lean manufacturing techniques. Blanket tariffs also fail to address deeper social maladies that undermine the very workforce factories need to succeed. In regions once dominated by assembly lines, rising rates of obesity, diabetes, and opioid addiction correlate closely with waves of plant closures and economic despair. Workers facing chronic health problems incur higher insurance costs, increased absenteeism, and limited stamina for physically demanding shift work. Educational gaps compound these challenges, since too few high school graduates possess the technical literacy required to operate CNC machines, program industrial robots, or interpret blueprints for precision welding. Meanwhile, decades of disinvestment have left highways riddled with potholes, bridges on the brink of collapse, and broadband internet coverage patchy at best, conditions that hamper real-time monitoring and data-driven analytics, both central to Industry 4.0. Add to this the social isolation born of pandemic lockdowns, partisan polarization, and suburban flight, and one sees a workforce that lacks not only the skills but also the communal support structures, childcare, public transit, healthcare clinics, that once anchored thriving factory towns. Without intentional, holistic investments in public health, education, infrastructure, and community revitalization, any uptick in orders driven by tariffs will likely collapse under its own weight as workers fall out of the labor pool. Commute times balloon. and fresh supply chain bottlenecks emerge. Even worse, broad tariffs can spawn perverse incentives and hidden costs that erode their own effectiveness. When duties rise uniformly across product categories, sophisticated importers exploit loopholes, reclassifying goods under alternative codes, routing shipments through third-party countries to exploit lower rates, or adjusting transfer pricing schemes to minimize immediate outlays. Such workarounds erode the intended revenue gains and shift economic activity toward jurisdictional arbitrage rather than genuine domestic production. Meanwhile, domestic producers reliant on imported intermediate goods, high-purity chemicals, specialty alloys, rare earth magnets, precision ball bearings, see their input costs surge, squeezing margins that cannot always be recouped through higher output prices. As consumer prices climb, households tighten their budgets, and demand for "made in America" goods can contract, turning what was intended to spark a manufacturing renaissance into a recipe for stagflation, rising prices alongside stagnant output. To avoid these pitfalls, policy must be surgical, not shotgun. Not all industries can be made domestically competitive by raising duties, and not all supply chains are ripe for onshore revival. Low-value added sectors, like basic apparel or simple assembly, face labor cost differentials that automation alone cannot bridge. Conversely, high-value sectors, semiconductor fabrication, precision machine tool manufacturing, clean energy components, offer strategic returns on capital, national security benefits, and existing research clusters that can be leveraged. Instead of blanket tariffs, Molson Hart recommends imposing steep, targeted duties, on the order of 300%, only on a carefully chosen list of critical imports where domestic capacity can be scaled, such as agricultural drones, specialized robotics, or advanced electronics. Essential intermediate and capital equipment imports that underpin these strategic sectors should remain tariff-free to avoid inflating cost bases for emerging domestic champions. But even surgical tariffs are only one leg of the stool. A smarter reshoring strategy rests on 4 complementary pillars. First, phase tariff increases gradually, starting at 25% in year 1, rising to 50% in year 2, 75% in year 3, and full duties by year 4, giving businesses time to renegotiate contracts, retool production lines, and invest in domestic capacity without being blindsided by sudden cost shocks. Second, implement duty drawback rebates that automatically refund duties on goods that are processed or re-exported, transforming U.S. ports and manufacturing zones into competitive global trade hubs rather than mere consumption terminals. Third, deploy targeted R&D and workforce training credits, boosting tax incentives for green tech manufacturing, apprenticeships in robotics and additive manufacturing, and industry university consortia that accelerate process innovations. Fourth, invest heavily in infrastructure modernization, rebuilding roads, railways, port facilities, power grids, water treatment plants, and extending ubiquitous high-speed broadband, to ensure that any reshored facility has the physical and digital backbone to operate at world-class efficiency. At the same time, industrial policy must be guided by real-time metrics and public engagement. Establishing an independent manufacturing renewal commission to track key performance indicators, investment inflows, job creation figures, productivity gains, export volumes, workforce skill certifications, community health metrics, and infrastructure milestones, allows for quarterly scorecards that highlight successes, surface unintended consequences, and recommend mid-course policy adjustments. Meanwhile, grassroots advocacy can be a powerful force multiplier. Small business coalitions, labor unions, academic researchers, and consumer groups can flood policymakers with data-driven reports. Local success stories from Appalachian machine shop revivals to Texas solar panel assembly clusters, and targeted testimony. Hashtags like #RebuildUSMFG and #SmartReshoring can magnify community voices, drawing the attention of legislators and building the shared commitment necessary to sustain a multi-decade industrial renaissance. Even the global context demands nuanced diplomacy. Allies and trade partners watch U.S. policy shifts closely. And unilateral tariffs risk retaliatory measures on agricultural exports, automotive parts, or intellectual property-intensive goods. Navigating the World Trade Organization, USMCA councils, and bilateral negotiations can help lock in labor and environmental standards that complement domestic reforms, creating mutually beneficial frameworks rather than zero-sum battles. Above all, the essence of a manufacturing revival is innovation, continuous process improvements, material breakthroughs, and digital transformation, not merely higher trade barriers. Just as Silicon Valley rose on venture capital, university labs, and a risk-taking culture, so too must manufacturing clusters leverage innovation ecosystems, co-located factories, pilot facilities, test beds, startup incubators, and public-private research partnerships. Tariffs may buy breathing room, but without parallel investments in intellectual property protections, entrepreneurship networks, and rapid prototyping centers, any production gains will remain fragile and transient. Crucially, factories are more than brick and steel, they are community keystones, shaping local identity and pride. When a new plant opens, municipal leaders, school districts, and civic organizations often rally behind workforce development, housing rehabilitation, and public space beautification. A shining example is Greenville, South Carolina, where the establishment of an electric vehicle battery plant spurred downtown revitalization, affordable housing initiatives, and technical education partnerships with local colleges. This sense of shared purpose transforms a factory from a mere production site into a catalyst for broad community renewal. In the end, reviving U.S. manufacturing is neither a sprint nor a one-off political gesture. It is a marathon requiring sustained cross-sector collaboration, multi-year policy continuity, and the unwavering conviction of citizens, businesses, labor groups, and local governments. Tariffs alone can open the door, but only through strategic, multi-pronged action, combining surgical duties, phased implementations, duty rebates, targeted incentives, infrastructure revamps, data-driven oversight, innovation ecosystems, public engagement, and global diplomacy, will America's industrial heartland truly beat again. So the next time you click share on a tariff announcement or hear a pundit proclaim, just raise taxes and watch the factories roll in, pause and ask, what about the hidden costs that rippled through small businesses? What about the 3 to 4 year build times for even a single plant? What about the health crises, skills gaps, and crumbling infrastructure that lie beneath the headlines? Because in the end, policy without planning is a hollow promise. Tariffs may strike a powerful chord, but it is the people, workers, innovators, families, and communities who must walk through the open door, build the factories, and sustain a future where, Made in America, stands for resilience, technological leadership, and shared prosperity.